So Donald Trump's improbable victory in the presidential elections in the United States of America is sending out ripples across the world. And our next story tries to understand as to why Trump's victory is making Ukraine nervous, Europe anxious, and Russia fairly optimistic. Take a look at this report.
I can tell you, his behavior at the moment of the attempt on his life impressed me. He turned out to be a courageous man. The desire to restore relations with Russia, to help bring the Ukrainian crisis to an end, I think that deserves attention at the very least. And I take this opportunity to congratulate him on his election as President of the United States of America.
That was Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulating Donald Trump on his election victory. Trump has spoken about his good ties with Putin, but Moscow is cautiously looking forward to Trump's presidency, who has vowed to end the war in one day, presumably by forcing Kiev to make territorial concessions.
So we have a very good relationship, and I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
In Kiev, the mood is anxious. Russian forces are continuously marching forward, gaining new territory daily. President Volodymyr Zelensky is urging NATO allies to maintain their unwavering support. Kiev warns that calls for ceasefire for Ukraine is very dangerous and is questioning Trump's rationale.
Currently, I believe that President Trump really wants a quick solution. He wants one, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen.
In Budapest, where European leaders are meeting, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has warm ties with Putin and is close to Trump, is claiming that Ukraine has already lost the war.
The situation on the front is obvious. There has been military defeat. The Americans are going to pull out of this war. They're not going to encourage the war and say that the war is a good thing.
Trump, who insists he can end the war in 24 hours, is yet to outline his plan. But his critical stance on US military aid to Ukraine has been consistent. European NATO allies are pressing for assurances that Trump will negotiate from a position of strength, protecting Ukraine's sovereignty and strategic interest. With Russia's attacks intensifying and Trump's America First stance, the stakes are high. Ukraine braces itself for a pivotal change, wary of becoming collateral damage in a renewed power dynamic between Washington and Moscow. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, now to give us more insights in terms of what, of course, is expected to happen in the Russia-Ukraine war, we're being joined by retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who's a military expert and also host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Colonel Davis, thank you very much indeed, sir, for taking time out and speaking to us on WION. Now, there's been a change of guard at the White House. Donald Trump will take over the presidency once he's inaugurated in January. He has said that he'll bring about peace and end the war between Russia and Ukraine, for which there are reports of a possible peace plan that are being floated around. What is your reading into this? Can Donald Trump bring an end to this war?
Well, listen, I certainly agree with what you quoted Viktor Orban is saying there a minute ago. I think I've said many times on your network that the war is flatly unwinnable for the Ukraine side. It doesn't matter how much weapons, ammunition, anything else you provide, because it's ultimately about men, not machines, and the Ukraine side simply doesn't have the men. And you could, of course, add the air power, the industrial capacity, and on and on. The war can't be won. Therefore, there's no value to continuing to try and pretend otherwise. In fact, you're going to harm your own interest and harm the Ukrainian side as well. I spoke yesterday to one of the senior advisors that's close to Trump and his transition team, and they said that his absolute intention is to get this move to a ceasefire immediately. That's one of his first priorities. Then he's going to worry about, having negotiations, and he understands that that's going to take a lot of time. But the most important thing to him, he said, is to end the killing on the Ukraine side, because he views this as an unwinnable war, just like Viktor Orban, apparently. So I think that's what you're going to see when he gets in office. I can't imagine him doing anything different than what he said.
Right. Now, this is an unwinnable war, as you say, and this is what has been said repeatedly by many experts. But the question, of course, is this. If Donald Trump were to call for a ceasefire with the current position of the troops, with Russia having occupied about 20% of the Ukrainian territory, and if that is how things would stand in the aftermath of the ceasefire, would that not be viewed as a surrender by the detractors of Donald Trump? He may bring about peace, but he'd be giving up territory and ceding territory to the Russians.
Well, implied in those views is that there's a choice to make. Implied in those views, and that's one of the things I take real issue with people who say those kinds of things, because they're implying that you can just not choose to do that and not give up territory. And I'll argue that you have to look at the reality on the ground. And by continuing down that path, what you will end up doing is not negotiating an end that may have 20% or more of Ukraine in the Russian orbit when it's over. But if you continue to ignore that, Russia will militarily continue to conquer territory until they have more. The truth is that unless the United States and NATO physically get involved in this war, and they're not, then there is no possibility for the Ukraine side even to hold on to what they have. If they get a negotiated deal right now for 20%, that's probably the best they can get, and it can get worse if they don't make such a deal.
In a report that's been put out by the Wall Street Journal, some of the details that are being put out about this potential peace plan of Donald Trump's team that are being floated around, it's being said that one of the conditions would be for Ukraine to agree that it would not join the NATO military alliance for the next 20 years. Besides this, it would not be the American troops. Instead, European troops from nations such as Britain, France, Poland, etc., who will monitor the buffer zone between Russia and Ukraine to ensure that there is peace. What is your reading into the fact that the American president, who will be taking charge in January, does not want to commit any American troops to ensure peace in Eastern Europe?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no question that he doesn't want one American boot on the ground in Ukraine that could have even the potential for having a war. And I frankly I'm uncertain at all that the Russian side would agree to having any Western troops on the ground in Ukraine as part of a negotiated settlement. See, that's part that I don't think gets enough viewpoints is what is the Russian side willing to do? How much are they willing to have a negotiated settlement too? Because you have to understand that from the Russian perspective, they offered a deal that by comparison today was extremely generous in December of 2021 that would have left Kiev in control of all of its territory, even nominally including the Donbass. But every time that they said no to that, the deals keep getting worse and worse. And the central part has always been no NATO in Ukraine. So that part I think is doable. But to have Western troops in there, I'm not sure that the Russian side would agree to that.
All right, we'll have to leave that. Thank you very much indeed, Colonel Davis, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.